My name is Ned, and at 32, I've built a successful career as a software engineer, while always being the responsible one in my family. My sister Jessica has been the golden child despite her string of financial disasters. When I discovered I wasn't invited to our annual lake house vacation because Jessica requested I be excluded, something inside me snapped. The $85,000 loan I gave her failing boutique suddenly felt very different. Let me take you through the family drama that exploded when I finally stood up for myself. Before I start my story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and the sweet taste of justified consequences. I grew up in a typical middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with tree-lined streets and weekend barbecues. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable. A 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a decent backyard where Dad attempted to grow tomatoes every summer with limited success. My father Robert taught high school physics for 30 years, passionate about education, but always stressed about money. Mom Diana worked as a pediatric nurse at the local hospital, picking up extra shifts whenever bills piled up. Then there was Jessica, my sister, 3 years younger, and somehow operating under a completely different set of family rules. While our parents were good people who loved us both, the contrast in how they treated us was obvious to everyone except them. Jessica could miss curfew with just a tired warning, while I would lose privileges for weeks for the same offense. Her mediocre report cards were met with statements like, "At least she passed everything," while my "as" were simply expected. Growing up, I was the kid with the paper route at 12, the one who saved birthday money instead of spending it, and the teenager who worked weekends at the local grocery store while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I wasn't perfect by any means, but I understood consequences and responsibility from an early age. Jessica, meanwhile, skipped classes regularly, threw parties when our parents worked night shifts, and went through friends like seasonal fashion trends. When she crashed Dad's car at 16, somehow the conversation ended with them buying her driving lessons instead of punishment. When she maxed out her first credit card at 18, my parents dipped into their thin savings to bail her out just this once, a phrase I would hear repeatedly throughout our adult lives. By the time college applications rolled around, I had already mapped out my future. I wanted to study computer science, seeing the growing tech industry as my ticket to financial independence. My parents pressed me toward medicine instead, such a stable career, Ned, but eventually supported my choice when I received a partial scholarship to the University of Michigan. Jessica bounced between 3 different majors before settling on communications, extending her 4-year degree to nearly 6, while racking up student loans that my parents co-signed without hesitation. When she needed extra money for spring break trips or apartment deposits, the family checkbook opened readily. Meanwhile, I worked 2 part-time jobs between classes and graduated with minimal debt. My early career wasn't smooth sailing. I started at a small software company with long hours and modest pay, sharing an apartment with 2 other guys to save money. For 3 years, I lived on ramen and ambition coding late into the night on side projects, hoping for a breakthrough. Jessica, fresh from her extended college experience, landed a marketing assistant job through Dad's former student but quit after 6 months because the environment wasn't nurturing. The pattern continued as I steadily climbed the career ladder, eventually securing a senior developer position at a major tech company in Chicago. My salary tripled. I bought a modern condo overlooking Lake Michigan, and I finally felt financially secure. Jessica, meanwhile, tried her hand at event planning, social media consulting, and briefly, real estate, never sticking with anything long enough to build actual expertise. Despite our differences, one tradition kept our family connected: our annual week-long vacation at Lake Michigan. My grandfather had built a modest cabin on the eastern shore back in the 1960s, and we'd gathered there every summer since before I was born. Those 7 days were sacred in our family calendar. No work calls, no outside commitments, just swimming, fishing, board games, and my mom's legendary blueberry pancakes. Even as an adult with mounting responsibilities, I guarded those vacation days, jealously turning down conferences and project launches that conflicted with our family time. Something about the sound of the screen door slamming, the smell of pine, and even the arguments over Monopoly connected me to my childhood in a way nothing else could. While Jessica and I might bicker over the thermostat setting or who forgot to buy more marshmallows for s'mores. Lake Michigan was our neutral territory, the place where family came first. At least that's what I thought until last summer. After cycling through half a dozen careers by her late 20s, Jessica announced at Christmas dinner 2 years ago that she had found her true calling: retail fashion. She wanted to open a boutique clothing store in an up-and-coming neighborhood in Grand Rapids, featuring curated items that would appeal to discerning millennials with disposable income. Her eyes sparkled as she outlined her vision, complete with exposed brick walls, minimalist displays, and an espresso bar in the corner. "I've already found the perfect location," she gushed, passing her phone around the table to show us pictures of a vacant storefront. "The lease is available next month, and the landlord is willing to give me a deal since several spaces on that block are empty." Mom clasped her hands together. "Oh, honey, that looks wonderful. Doesn't it sound perfect, Robert?" Dad nodded enthusiastically. "You've always had an eye for fashion, Jess. This could really be your thing." I took a sip of water, wondering if I was the only one who remembered Jessica's abandoned Etsy shop selling hand-painted scarves, or her brief stint as a personal shopper that ended when a client complained about her recommendations. But their expressions were so hopeful, so convinced that this time would be different. "Have you put together a business plan?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Retail has pretty thin margins these days with online competition." Jessica's smile faltered slightly. "I'm working on it. But this is about creating an experience, not just selling products. People will come for the vibe." "Vibes don't pay rent," I said immediately, regretting my bluntness when Mom shot me a warning look. "Actually," Jessica continued, "that's something I wanted to talk to everyone about. I've been saving, but I need some startup capital. Banks want to see more industry experience than I have." Dad's face fell. "Sweetheart, you know we'd help if we could, but with the new roof last year and your mother's medical bills." I know, Jessica said quickly. "I wasn't asking you guys. I was hoping." She turned those familiar, pleading eyes toward me. "Ned, you're doing so well now. I'd make you a partner. 20% of the business." The table went silent. I felt 3 pairs of eyes on me waiting. This wasn't the first time Jessica had asked me for money, but never on this scale. Previous loans for car repairs or security deposits had a way of transforming into gifts forgotten as soon as the check cleared. "How much are you thinking?" I asked, already calculating what I could spare from my savings. $85,000 should cover the deposit, first 6 months of rent, inventory, and store fixtures. She said too quickly, making me suspect she'd already spent this money in her mind. I nearly choked on my water. "That's a significant investment, Jess." "It's not just for me," she countered. "It's an investment in family. When the store takes off, we all benefit. Plus, I'll pay you back with interest, of course." Over the next week, Jessica bombarded me with Pinterest boards of her store concept, rough sales projections, and enthusiastic texts about potential vendors. My parents called daily, not explicitly pressuring me, but making comments like, "Jessica is so excited about your potential partnership," and "It's wonderful to see you two working together finally." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet with Jessica and tour the potential store location. The space had potential, I had to admit. High ceilings, good natural light, and a prime corner spot on a street showing early signs of gentrification. Jessica practically bounced as she pointed out where each display would go, how foot traffic from the new coffee shop across the street would bring in customers, and how the basement could eventually be converted to an exclusive, appointment-only showroom. Her enthusiasm was contagious, but the practical side of me couldn't ignore the vacant storefronts on the same block or the limited parking. Still, I wanted to believe in her. Maybe this really was her calling. Maybe supporting her dream would heal some of the tension that had always simmered between us. "I'll help you," I said finally, "but with conditions. This needs to be a proper business loan with terms, not a handshake deal." Jessica's face fell slightly. "You don't trust me?" "This isn't about trust. It's about setting this up right. I'll draw up an agreement with reasonable interest and a payment schedule that won't strain your early operations. I'll also help you set up proper accounting systems and a website." She hugged me tight. Thank you. You won't regret this. In 2 years, this place will be the hottest shop in Grand Rapids." I contacted my lawyer the next day to draft a formal loan agreement. The terms were generous 4% interest payments beginning after 6 months to allow the business to stabilize and a 5-year repayment period. I insisted on quarterly financial reviews and approval rights for any significant business changes. When I presented the contract to Jessica at our parents' house, her smile stiffened. "This island, very detailed." "It protects both of us," I explained. "Everything we discussed is here just formalized." "It feels so cold," Mom interjected, looking over Jessica's shoulder at the document. "Your family, not some bank." "Which is exactly why we need clarity," I countered. "I want Jessica's business to succeed, and proper structure helps with that." Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ned has a point, Diana. This is a substantial amount of money." Jessica signed reluctantly, making a show of barely reading the terms. "Happy now, Mr. Businessman?" I ignored her tone and proceeded to transfer the funds the following day. Over the next few weeks, I helped her set up a point-of-sale system, build a simple but effective website, and establish bookkeeping practices that would keep her finances transparent and organized. She tolerated my assistance with thinly veiled impatience, clearly viewing these steps as unnecessary hoops rather than fundamental business practices. Boutique Bliss opened with considerable fanfare 3 months later. Jessica had managed to get a local lifestyle blogger to cover the launch, and the store looked genuinely impressive on opening day. Clean white walls showcased carefully selected clothing items, artful displays featured local jewelry, and the small espresso bar in the corner created the community atmosphere Jessica had envisioned. The first 2 quarters exceeded modest projections. Jessica was diligent about sending me the agreed-upon financial reports, and our weekly check-in calls were productive. I began to think maybe I had been too cynical too quick, to doubt her commitment based on past patterns. Then the reports started coming later. The weekly calls became bi-weekly, then monthly, with Jessica citing how busy she was with store operations. When I visited the boutique 6 months in, I noticed fewer customers and some empty spaces on previously full racks. Jessica dismissed my concerns, explaining she was curating a more selective inventory and focusing on quality over quantity. By month 8, the first loan payment was 2 weeks late, accompanied by a breezy email about a temporary cash flow issue that would resolve once seasonal inventory sold through. I tried not to worry, remembering that new businesses often face ups and downs. But when the next payment arrived nearly a month late, with no explanation, the old familiar feeling of being taken advantage of began to resurface. This past spring was particularly intense at work. My team was launching a major software update requiring 60-hour weeks and constant problem-solving. By early June, I was running on caffeine and determination, my eyes burning from staring at code for days on end. The thought of our upcoming lake house vacation kept me going through debugging sessions that stretched past midnight. 2 weeks of peace swimming in the cool lake and disconnecting from technology was exactly what I needed. My girlfriend Amanda had finally agreed to join us this year, after dating for nearly 10 months. She'd heard so many stories about the cabin that she joked she felt like she'd already been there. I warned her about the squeaky screen door, the temperamental water heater, and my mother's tendency to overpack food, as if we were preparing for hibernation rather than a vacation. I've bought new swim trunks, and everything I told her during a rare dinner together, where neither of us was working. Dad's been texting about the fishing conditions. Apparently the bass are running early this year. Amanda smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You light up when you talk about that place. I can't wait to see it." The next morning, while waiting for a meeting to start, I mindlessly scrolled through social media and froze when I saw a post from my cousin Tyler, Lake Michigan. "Sunsets never disappoint. Can't wait for the Parker family vacation next week." Attached was a photo of our family cabin, golden light streaming through the pines. Next week? That couldn't be right. Our vacation was always the last 2 weeks of July, not June. And Tyler usually came for just a weekend visit during our stay, not as part of the main vacation. I called my mother immediately, my stomach already knotting with a familiar dread. "Mom, I just saw Tyler's post about the lake house. Did the dates change?" A long pause followed. "Oh, Ned. I thought we'd discussed this." "Discussed what? Nobody told me anything about changing the vacation schedule." Another pause. Well, it's just for this year. Jessica thought it might be nice to try some new dates, with the weather being so lovely in June lately. The pieces started falling into place. So the family vacation is happening next week. Were you planning to tell me? Or was I supposed to figure it out from social media? Honey, Jessica felt that maybe this year you might. Well, she said things have been tense between you two because of the store, and she really needs a stress-free break. My grip tightened on the phone. Are you telling me I'm not invited to the family vacation because Jessica doesn't want me there? Not forever, sweetheart. Just this one time. She's been under so much pressure with the business, and you know how you can be sometimes. A little judgmental about her choices. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. 30 years of family tradition, and I was being excluded because my sister found my presence stressful, because I expected her to honor our business agreement. Does Dad agree with this? I managed to ask through clenched teeth. He understands that Jessica needs some special consideration right now. We were going to suggest a different trip with just you later in the summer. A consolation vacation, I said flatly. Because I'm what the difficult child now. Because I expect loan payments that Jessica agreed to. It's not like that, Ned. We just want everyone to be happy, and sometimes that means compromising. Interesting that I'm always the one expected to do the compromising. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Enjoy your vacation. I need to go. I hung up before she could respond, and sat motionless at my desk, emails pinging unnoticed. The family cabin had been my sanctuary since childhood. I could picture every knot in the wooden floors, every watercolor landscape my grandmother had painted hanging on the walls. The idea of everyone gathering there without me felt like having a door slammed in my face. That evening, I recounted the conversation to Amanda, the words tasting bitter as I spoke them. They're seriously uninviting you from your own family vacation. Her indignation on my behalf was both comforting and validating. Because your sister doesn't want to be reminded she owes you money. Apparently, I'm too judgmental. I paced the living room, unable to sit still. 32 years of being the responsible one, and this is what I get. Amanda watched me with concerned eyes. Have you talked to Jessica directly? I tried calling. She texted back saying she's too busy with inventory to talk, but that she hopes I understand this vacation needs to be about relaxation, not business discussions. That's convenient, Amanda muttered. I collapsed onto the couch beside her. You know what's really bothering me? This isn't the first time. When I got accepted to the University of Michigan, my graduation dinner turned into a discussion about how Jessica was struggling with her college applications. When I bought this condo, the housewarming somehow became about Jessica's rental woes. Amanda nodded slowly. I've noticed how conversations shift at family gatherings. Your promotion last year got about 5 minutes before your mom started talking about Jessica's store concept. I've spent my life being understanding, making allowances, being the bigger person I said, the realization, crystallizing as I spoke. And now I'm literally being uninvited from my family because I'm an inconvenience to Jessica's narrative. What are you going to do? I stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, the lights blurring through unexpected tears. I don't know yet, but I'm done being the only one who keeps his promises. Later that night, unable to sleep, I checked the business accounting portal I'd set up for Jessica's boutique. She hadn't updated it in over 2 months. 3 loan payments were now officially overdue, with no communication beyond vague assurances of catching up soon. Something didn't add up. Even if sales were slow, the financial cushion I'd provided should have covered basic obligations. I tried calling Jessica again the next morning, determined to understand what was happening with both the business and the vacation situation. What now, Ned? She answered, irritation evident in her voice. I'm in the middle of inventory. I think we need to talk about why I'm suddenly excluded from a family tradition that's been consistent my entire life. She sighed dramatically. Look, I just need one vacation without you hovering over me, asking about spreadsheets and profit margins. Is that so wrong? Those spreadsheets represent $85,000 I lent you in good faith, I reminded her. Money you haven't been repaying, according to our agreement. God, this is exactly why I needed space. Everything is always about your precious loan. The business is fine, It's just growing pains. You wouldn't understand because everything always works out perfectly for you. The absurdity of her statement left me momentarily speechless. Nothing was handed to me, Jessica. I worked for everything I have. And you never let anyone forget it, she snapped. Always the perfect son, with the perfect job, and the perfect financial decisions. Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow? Mom and Dad may not say it, but they compare us constantly. So, your solution is to exclude me from family events. It's one vacation, Ned. One time when I don't have to feel like a failure next to Saint Ned. I'll catch up on the payments next month, I promise. The call ended with nothing resolved, leaving me with a hollow feeling that expanded through the day. That evening, I received a text from my father. Mom told me about your call. We should have handled this better, son. Jessica's just going through a rough patch with the store and needed a stress-free family break. We'll make it up to you. Even in his attempt at reconciliation, the message was clear. Jessica's comfort came first. My feelings were an afterthought, something to be addressed later when convenient. As I stared at the message, pieces of a lifetime of similar moments flashed through my mind, forming a pattern I had always excused or ignored. The conversation with Jessica and my parents' subsequent justifications left me deeply unsettled. While I'd always been aware of the different standards applied to us, having it so blatantly demonstrated awakened something in me. If Jessica claimed business growing pains were preventing her from making loan payments, I needed to verify that claim before the family drama clouded my judgment. I still had access to the accounting software I'd set up for Boutique Bliss, though Jessica had stopped updating the main dashboards months ago. Digging deeper into the system that Saturday morning, I discovered she hadn't stopped using it entirely. She'd simply changed which modules she was actively maintaining. The sales records told an interesting story. While overall revenue had indeed dipped from the initial months, the boutique wasn't failing catastrophically. There were solid sales days interspersed with slower periods, typical for a new retail business finding its footing. The inventory management showed regular new product arrivals, indicating Jessica was still investing in fresh merchandise. The problem revealed itself in the expense reports. Alongside legitimate business costs, like rent, utilities, and wholesale purchases, were increasingly frequent, withdrawals categorized vaguely as marketing expenses or business development. These ambiguous expenses had started small but grown substantially over the past 3 months, coinciding exactly with when the loan repayments began falling behind. I cross-referenced the dates of large marketing withdrawals with Jessica's personal Instagram. The correlation was undeniable. A $4,000 to $1,000 vendor relationship development expense matched precisely with photos of Jessica at a weekend spa retreat with friends. A business conference withdrawal aligned with her posts from a beachfront hotel in Florida, with no mention of any conference or business contacts. Most damning was the transportation upgrade for client meetings, $7,500 withdrawn 3 weeks earlier. Jessica's social media revealed proud photos of her posing beside a used luxury convertible, describing it as "my new baby," with no mention of business purposes. My stomach churned as I compiled the evidence. This wasn't about business struggles. Jessica was systematically siphoning money from the boutique, money that should have gone toward loan repayments and business growth, to fund a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. I debated my next move carefully. Direct confrontation had rarely worked with Jessica, who excelled at emotional deflection. Instead, I called the boutique directly during business hours, asking for Jessica, but getting her part-time assistant Madison instead. "Jessica's not in on Saturdays anymore," Madison explained. "She usually comes in Tuesday through Friday, now mostly afternoons." This contradicted Jessica's claims about working overtime to save the business. Casual conversation with Madison revealed other concerning details. Jessica had recently hired a personal shopper consultant to source her own wardrobe, while reducing Madison's hours to cut costs. The espresso bar had been unstaffed for weeks because payroll needs to be managed carefully. That evening, I finally reached Jessica on her cell phone. Instead of immediately confronting her with what I'd discovered, I took a different approach. "I've been thinking about our situation," I began calmly. "If the business is struggling, maybe I can help review the finances and suggest some adjustments to make the loan payments more manageable." Her response was immediate and defensive. "I don't need you micromanaging me, Ned. The business is fine. Then why are the loan payments 3 months behind? A slight pause. Like I said, growing pains. I'm reinvesting in the business. Reinvesting how exactly? God, this is exactly why I didn't want you at the lake house. Everything has to be interrogated and analyzed to death. Sometimes in fashion retail, you have to invest in your personal brand image. My customers expect a certain lifestyle aesthetic. Is that why you bought a BMW convertible as a transportation upgrade for client meetings? The line went silent for several seconds. You've been spying on the business accounts, she finally said, her voice cold. I've been reviewing the financial records of a business I invested in, as is my right per our agreement. An agreement you're violating by using business funds for personal expenses while defaulting on loan payments. That car is a business expense I meet with vendors and drive to networking events. I can't show up looking like some broke startup owner. And the spa weekend with your college roommates. The trip to Florida. Building relationships is part of business development. You wouldn't understand because you sit behind a computer all day. In my industry, image is everything. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Jessica eventually admitting she felt entitled to some perks after all her hard work launching the store. When I pressed about the lake house vacation, she revealed the full extent of her manipulation. Fine. You want to know the truth. I told Mom and Dad you've been harassing me constantly about the money showing up at the store unannounced and embarrassing me in front of customers. I said you were threatening to shut down the business if I didn't pay immediately. I was stunned. None of that ever happened. They don't know that, she replied with unsettling casualness. They agreed you were being unreasonable and that I deserved a peaceful vacation without your negativity. Mom suggested maybe you weren't invited this year. The calculated nature of her lies left me speechless. I'd known Jessica could be self-centered, but this level of deliberate deception toward our parents shocked me. So you lied to our parents to get me excluded, while simultaneously misappropriating business funds instead of making loan payments you agreed to. Don't be so dramatic. It's one family vacation, and the money situation is temporary. The fall collection is going to turn everything around. After ending the call, I sat in my darkened living room, trying to process what I'd learned. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, "Just checking in, honey. Hope you're not too upset about the vacation change. Jessica says the store is really picking up, and she's working so hard. We're all so proud of her entrepreneurial spirit." The message confirmed what Jessica had revealed. My parents had fully bought into her fabricated narrative, casting me as the unreasonable villain in her story. Years of giving Jessica the benefit of the doubt, of making allowances for her choices, had culminated in being not just excluded, but actively misrepresented to my own family. When Amanda came over later that evening, I shared everything I'd discovered. "This goes beyond sibling rivalry, Ned," she said, after reviewing the financial evidence I'd compiled. "She's committing fraud, using business funds for personal expenses while defaulting on obligations. And she's manipulating your parents to isolate you when you try to hold her accountable." "What would you do?" I asked, genuinely uncertain about my next steps. Amanda considered the question carefully. "I think you need to ask yourself what this relationship is actually giving you. Your sister takes advantage of your financial success while resenting you for it. Your parents enable her behavior at your expense. At what point do you stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm?" Her words resonated with a lifetime of similar patterns. The next morning, I called my parents directly, hoping for a different outcome. "Dad, I need to understand something. Did Jessica tell you I've been harassing her about the loan payments?" My father's uncomfortable silence told me everything. "She mentioned you've been putting a lot of pressure on her during a difficult time for the business," he finally said. "Your mother and I felt she needed this vacation to decompress without business discussions complicating things. Have I ever given you reason to believe I would harass anyone? In 32 years, have I ever been that person?" "No, but Jessica has always been more sensitive. You know that. She needs more encouragement, less criticism. Even when she's lying, even when she's misusing business funds." My father's tone shifted to one I recognized from childhood, the one that indicated the conversation was becoming inconvenient. "I'm sure there are two sides to this story, Ned. Why don't we all discuss it? After the vacation. When everyone's had some space. After these conversations, I spent several days in deep reflection reviewing not just the current situation, but the decades-long pattern it represented. I'd always believed that family meant supporting each other unconditionally, but I was beginning to understand that my definition of support and my family's were fundamentally different. After nearly a week of careful consideration and consultation with Amanda, I scheduled an appointment with the lawyer who had drafted the original loan agreement. Catherine Lee had been my attorney for several years, handling everything from my condo purchase to my stock options. Her office overlooked Millennium Park, the summer greenery, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows as she reviewed the documents I'd brought. "The terms of this agreement are quite clear," Catherine said, looking up from the paperwork. "Your sister has violated several conditions that trigger default remedies. The missed payments alone would be sufficient, but the misappropriation of business funds for personal expenses explicitly violates Section 4.3. "What options do I have?" I asked, still conflicted, despite my resolve. "Based on this agreement, you're entitled to demand immediate repayment of the full loan amount plus accrued interest. If she cannot comply, you could pursue legal action to recover the funds, potentially, including placing a lien against business assets." I nodded slowly. And if I wanted to give her one final opportunity to correct course. Catherine considered this. "You could issue a formal notice of default with a cure period, typically 14 days, during which she could bring payments current and provide assurances of proper fund management going forward." "That seems reasonable," I said, though the knot in my stomach suggested my emotions weren't fully aligned with my logical decision. "Ned," Catherine said, her tone softening slightly, "may I speak frankly? I've seen many family business arrangements go sideways. The legal remedy is often the easiest part. Have you considered the personal ramifications? My family is currently on vacation without me because my sister lied about my behavior and manipulated our parents," I replied. "I'm not sure the personal relationship can get much worse." Catherine nodded, understanding the subtext. "I'll draft the default notice today. You can review it tomorrow. Remember, sending this is simply enforcing the agreement both parties signed willingly. You're not the bad guy for expecting the terms to be honored." The next day, I approved Catherine's precisely worded default notice. It detailed the specific violations of our agreement, including missed payments and documented misuse of business funds. It provided a 14-day period to remedy these violations by 1. Making all overdue loan payments immediately. 2. Providing complete and transparent business financial records. 3. Ceasing all personal use of business funds. 4. Implementing oversight measures to prevent future misappropriation. The notice concluded by stating that failure to comply would result in the full loan amount becoming immediately due, followed by legal proceedings if necessary. With a deep breath, I authorized Catherine to email the document to Jessica's business and personal email addresses. I also made the difficult decision to blind copy my parents, ending the information asymmetry Jessica had exploited. No more filtered versions of reality. They would see the factual, documented truth of the situation. Within 30 minutes of the email being sent, my phone exploded with notifications. First came Jessica's text messages, oscillating between fury and panic. "Are you kidding me? A legal notice? We're family. You had no right to involve a lawyer in our private business. Please call me immediately. This is going to ruin everything I've built. You can't possibly expect me to come up with all that money in 2 weeks." I didn't respond to these messages, knowing any reply would be twisted and reframed. Next came the phone calls, 6 from Jessica within an hour, followed by 4 from my mother and 2 from my father. I let each go to voicemail, needing to maintain the emotional distance I'd carefully established. My mother's voicemail was tearful. "Ned, honey, we just got this terrible email about Jessica's store. There must be some mistake. Please call us back at the lake house. Your father is very upset." My father's message was more direct. "Son, whatever disagreement you're having with your sister, bringing lawyers into it is completely inappropriate. Call me back so we can sort this out like family." Jessica's voicemails grew increasingly desperate, culminating in one that revealed her true concern. "The business can't survive this, Ned. If you force me to pay everything now, I'll have to close the store. Is that what you want? To destroy my dream because you're jealous? I have a real business while you just work for someone else? The irony of her claiming ownership of a real business that she was systematically undermining wasn't lost on me. By evening, the calls had escalated to include my Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who had apparently been enlisted as a mediator. Ned, it's Aunt Linda. Your parents called me very upset about some legal situation with Jessica's boutique. They're cutting the vacation short to deal with this. Is there anything I can do to help resolve this before it gets worse? I finally answered Aunt Linda's call, knowing she had always been more objective about family dynamics. Hi, Aunt Linda. I'm sorry you've been dragged into this. Don't apologize. I gathered from your mother's somewhat hysterical explanation that Jessica's been playing fast and loose with business finances and loan repayments. Is that accurate? Her directness was refreshing. Yes. I provided a significant business loan that she's defaulted on while using business funds for personal expenses like luxury cars and vacations. That tracks with what I've observed, she said dryly. And let me guess. When you tried to address it, you became the villain of the story. Something like that. They excluded me from the family vacation because Jessica convinced them I was harassing her about money. Aunt Linda sighed audibly. Robert and Diana mean well, but they've never been able to see Jessica clearly. You know, she told everyone at the lake house, you couldn't come because you were too busy with work to commit to family time. The casual dishonesty still had the power to sting. That's not remotely true. I figured as much. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who's drowning is not to jump in after them, but to throw them a life preserver from solid ground. After talking with Aunt Linda, I finally called Amanda, who had been texting supportive messages throughout the day. How are you holding up? She asked immediately. Better than expected, I admitted. There's something liberating about finally saying no more after a lifetime of making allowances. Have your parents called? Multiple times. They're apparently cutting the vacation short to handle the crisis. Amanda was quiet for a moment. Are you prepared for them to show up here? I hadn't considered that possibility, but it seemed entirely plausible. I guess I'll find out how committed I am to this boundary if they do. Whatever happens, I'm in your corner, she assured me. This isn't about punishing Jessica. It's about refusing to enable harmful patterns anymore. Over the next few days, the communication attempts continued. Jessica's messages shifted from outrage to bargaining, offering partial payments and vague promises of better behavior. My parents left increasingly concerned voicemails, clearly struggling to reconcile the legal documents' detailed evidence with Jessica's version of events. On day 4, after sending the notice, I received an unexpected email from Jessica's business account containing a PDF attachment. It was a hastily assembled counterproposal suggesting a revised payment schedule with lower monthly amounts stretched over 7 years instead of the original 5. The document made no acknowledgement of the misused funds, nor did it address the patterns of financial mismanagement. It was essentially a request to formalize and extend the very behavior that had necessitated the default notice in the first place. I forwarded it to Catherine with a brief note. This doesn't address the core issues. Proceed as planned. The following day, an email arrived from my father's account, clearly written by both parents. Ned, we're trying to understand the situation with Jessica's business from both sides. While we appreciate there may be legitimate financial concerns, the aggressive legal approach seems excessive for a family matter. Jessica has shown us a plan to repay the loan on a more manageable schedule. Can we please discuss this as a family before involving courts and lawyers? We're cutting our vacation short and will be home tomorrow. Perhaps we could all meet for dinner this weekend to find a resolution that works for everyone. Their email revealed they were still viewing this as a simple disagreement that could be resolved with family dinner diplomacy rather than a pattern of deliberate financial misconduct and manipulation. It also showed they hadn't fully grasped that Jessica's repayment plan was essentially a request to continue breaking our agreement with official permission. I replied with a brief factual response. I understand you want to help resolve this situation. However, this isn't a misunderstanding. It's a documented pattern of financial mismanagement and deliberate deception. Jessica has had multiple opportunities to honor our original agreement and has chosen not to. The legal notice provides a clear path forward that protects everyone's interests. I'm not interested in negotiating new terms that essentially reward the behavior that created this problem. 2 days later, I received notification that my parents had arrived back in Grand Rapids. Rather than calling me, they apparently went straight to Jessica's boutique for an emergency strategy session. Aunt Linda, still at the lake house, texted me updates she received from my cousin. "Your parents and Jessica spent 3 hours with an accountant today," she wrote. "Apparently the numbers aren't adding up the way Jessica claimed. Your mother looked shell-shocked when they left." The family communication channels went surprisingly quiet after that. No calls, no texts, no emails for nearly 48 hours. Then on day 9 of the 14-day notice period, my father called. This time I answered. "Ned," he said, his voice sounding tired in a way I'd never heard before. "I think we need to talk in person, just you and me." My father suggested meeting at a neutral location, a diner halfway between Chicago and Grand Rapids that our family had often stopped at during my college years. I made the 2-hour drive the following morning, spotting his familiar sedan in the parking lot as I pulled in. He was already seated in a corner booth, looking older than I remembered from Christmas, the lines around his eyes deeper. "Thanks for coming," he said, as I slid into the booth across from him. "I thought we should talk without the emotions that seem to take over at home lately." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Your mother and I have spent the past few days reviewing Jessica's business records with an accountant friend of mine." He began turning his coffee mug slowly in his hands. "The situation island. Not what we were led to believe." "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone neutral. The accountant confirmed what your legal notice stated. Jessica has been using business funds inappropriately while falling behind on legitimate obligations. The boutique itself isn't failing. It's actually showing modest potential. But her financial management has been irresponsible at best. Coming from my father, who had always found ways to excuse Jessica's behavior, this admission was significant. "The car was the tipping point for me," he continued. "She told us it was a business investment for deliveries and client meetings. When we learned she'd spent $7,500 of business money on a personal vehicle while defaulting on your loan payments," he shook his head. "I couldn't rationalize that." "I appreciate you looking at the evidence objectively," I said carefully. "It wasn't an easy decision to send that notice." "I believe that." He met my eyes directly. "What I'm struggling with is how we got here. Not just Jessica's choices, but our role in enabling them. And the fact that you were excluded from a family tradition, based on what we now know, were misrepresentations. The acknowledgement of their role was unexpected." For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Your mother is having a harder time with all this," he finally continued. "She keeps saying Jessica just needs more guidance, that cutting off financial support will only make things worse. But I think we've been confusing support with enablement for a long time." "That's an important distinction," I agreed. "Jessica's meeting with your lawyer tomorrow to discuss options." The accountant made it clear that the full amount can't be repaid immediately without essentially liquidating the business. "Is that outcome you're seeking?" "No," I said honestly. "I never wanted the business to fail. I wanted it to be run responsibly, with respect for agreements made and boundaries set." My father nodded slowly. "Would you be open to a structured resolution that includes stricter oversight? Perhaps the accountant continuing to monitor business finances and all major decisions requiring approval." "I'd consider it, if Jessica is genuinely willing to change her approach. But I need more than promises this time." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering not just the current situation, but deeper family patterns that had contributed to it. For perhaps the first time, my father truly listened to my perspective without immediately defending Jessica or suggesting I needed to be more understanding. As we prepared to leave, he asked the question I'd been expecting, "Will you be open to speaking with your mother soon? She's struggling with all of this." "I will," I promised. "But I need to know she's willing to see the situation clearly, not just seek peace at any price." "That's fair," he conceded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the vacation. That should never have happened." Back in Chicago, Amanda was waiting at my condo, anxious to hear how the meeting had gone. "Better than expected," I told her, recounting the conversation. "My father seems to genuinely understand the situation now. Jessica has apparently been confronted with the financial evidence and can't maintain her narrative anymore. What happens next? She asked. Jessica meets with Catherine tomorrow. I imagine they'll discuss a potential restructuring of the loan with proper oversight measures. True to Aunt Linda's intelligence network, I received updates throughout the next few days. Jessica had indeed met with Catherine, bringing along my parents' accountant friend. The meeting had reportedly been tense, but productive, with Jessica finally acknowledging the seriousness of her financial mismanagement. Meanwhile, my extended family had taken sides in the conflict. My mother's sister, Carol, called to tell me I was being ruthlessly capitalistic toward my own sister. My cousin Tyler, who had innocently revealed the vacation situation, sent a supportive text saying he'd always seen how differently Jessica was treated and thought my stance was long overdue. Jessica herself maintained radio silence toward me, communicating exclusively through Catherine. The 14-day deadline passed, and Catherine informed me that Jessica had submitted a formal response, a documented acknowledgement of the violations, a certified cashier's check for the overdue payments, and a proposed oversight structure moving forward. The proposal included 1. Monthly, rather than quarterly, financial reviews conducted by an independent accountant. 2. A separate business account requiring dual authorization for withdrawals over $500. 3. A revised repayment schedule that was more aggressive, not less, potentially allowing the loan to be repaid in 4 years instead of 5. 4A. Written acknowledgement that any future misuse of business funds would trigger immediate full repayment demands. It was more than I had expected, a genuine attempt at accountability rather than evasion. After reviewing the proposal with Catherine, I agreed to the terms with one additional requirement. Jessica would need to provide a written statement to our parents, acknowledging that she had misrepresented my actions and behavior regarding the business and the loan. This last condition proved to be the sticking point. Jessica balked initially, telling Catherine it was humiliating and unnecessary to formalize such a personal matter. But after 3 days of impasse, she finally submitted a brief but direct statement, acknowledging that I had never harassed her about the business, that the exclusion from the family vacation had been orchestrated based on misrepresentations, and that my enforcement of the loan agreement was justified given her actions. With this final piece in place, we executed the revised agreement. The boutique would continue operating, but with financial guardrails that would prevent further mismanagement. Jessica would retain day-to-day operational control while adhering to proper business practices regarding fund usage. Throughout this resolution process, my mother had been notably absent from direct communication. According to my father, she was processing the situation and finding it difficult to reconcile Jessica's acknowledged misconduct with her lifelong perception of family dynamics. 2 weeks after the new agreement was signed, I received a text from my mother asking if she could visit Chicago the following weekend. I agreed, suggesting lunch at a restaurant rather than my condo, still needing some emotional distance. When we met, her eyes were red-rimmed despite careful makeup. "I've been trying to find the right words," she began after we ordered. "Your father says I need to simply acknowledge what happened without qualifications or excuses." "That would be a good start," I agreed. She nodded, twisting her napkin in her hands. "We failed you, Ned. Not just with the vacation, but with years of different expectations and standards. I didn't see it clearly until this situation forced me to look at patterns I've been excusing Jessica's entire life." "Why do you think that happened?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. She considered the question carefully. Jessica struggled more from the beginning. She had learning difficulties in school, social challenges your father and I didn't know how to help with. Somewhere along the way, I think we confused struggling with deserving special treatment. You were so capable, so self-sufficient, it was easy to focus our energy on the squeaky wheel. "But capability shouldn't be punished," I said quietly. "Self-sufficiency shouldn't mean being taken for granted." "No, it shouldn't," she agreed, tears welling. "I'm so sorry, Ned." For the vacation, for believing Jessica's version, without question, for years of unbalanced expectations. I don't know if I can make it right, but I want to try. The conversation was difficult, but necessary, touching on decades of family dynamics that had shaped all of us. By the end, We'd reached no neat resolution, but had established a foundation of honesty that felt like a crucial first step. As the dust settled over the following weeks, the new business structure began to function as intended. Jessica was initially resentful of the oversight, but gradually adapted as the boutique's financial health improved under more disciplined management. My parents maintained a more balanced approach to both of us, though years of established patterns wouldn't change overnight. Aunt Linda reported that family discussions about the situation continued in my absence, with various relatives processing the shift in narrative from Ned the harsh businessman to Jessica the financial mismanager. The family system was recalibrating around a more truthful dynamic, uncomfortable as that process might be. 6 months after the confrontation that reshaped our family dynamics, I found myself back in Grand Rapids for Thanksgiving. Amanda accompanied me, her presence, a steady reminder of the healthier relationship patterns I was working to establish in my life. The boutique had undergone visible changes since my last visit. The inventory was more focused, the displays more strategic. A new sign behind the register listed business hours that were actually adhered to, and Madison had been promoted to assistant manager, providing structure during the hours Jessica wasn't present. Most significantly, the monthly financial reports had arrived consistently for 6 straight months, each showing improving business metrics and on-time loan payments. The independent accountant confirmed that business and personal expenses remained appropriately separated, with no further instances of fund misappropriation. Jessica and I maintained a cordial but distant relationship. Our interactions were primarily business-focused, with personal conversation limited to group settings like family gatherings. There was an unspoken agreement to respect this new boundary, acknowledging that trust would need to be rebuilt gradually, if at all. My parents had made genuine efforts to correct the imbalanced family dynamics. When I received a significant promotion at work, my mother organized a celebration dinner focused entirely on my achievement, with no conversation shifts toward Jessica's affairs. My father called regularly just to check in, something he'd rarely done before the confrontation. The lake house situation had resolved in an unexpected way. Rather than accepting their offer of a makeup vacation, Amanda and I had used those 2 weeks to visit Japan. Instead, a trip we'd talked about taking for years. The experience of creating our own tradition, independent of family expectations, had been liberating and joyful. Sitting at my parents' dining table, that Thanksgiving watching the familiar family interactions with new awareness, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary, not just for my own well-being, but for the health of the relationships themselves. By allowing natural consequences to unfold, rather than constantly absorbing the impact of others' choices, I had actually created space for genuine growth and accountability. I had discovered that family love didn't have to mean unconditional financial support or unquestioning acceptance of harmful behaviors. True support sometimes meant saying no, standing firm, and allowing people to face the reality of their choices, even when that process was painful. Perhaps most importantly, I had realized that my value wasn't determined by my utility to others. For years, I had derived a certain pride from being the reliable one, the problem solver, the financial safety net. But that role had also trapped me in patterns that allowed others to take advantage of my reliability while resenting me for the same qualities. After dinner, as the family scattered to various corners of the house, Jessica approached me on the back porch, where I had stepped out for some air. "The accountant says we might be able to pay off the loan ahead of schedule if the holiday sales meet projections," she said, keeping a careful distance. "That's good news," I replied. "The store looks better organized." She nodded, looking out at the darkened yard. "It turns out I'm actually decent at the creative side of retail when I'm not trying to fund a lifestyle the business can't support." The acknowledgement, however, indirect, was significant. "Madison seems to be thriving in her expanded role," I observed. She islanded. "Turns out I needed a detail person to balance my big-picture approach." Jessica hesitated, then added, "Kind of like you were trying to be from the beginning, I guess." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unsaid things between us. "I'm not good at apologies," she finally continued. "But I am sorry, Ned. Not just for the money stuff, but for lying about you to Mom and Dad. For the vacation. For resenting your success instead of appreciating your help. Thank you for saying that. I said simply. I hope the business continues to grow. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation, but it was an honest exchange. Perhaps the most honest we'd had in years. Some relationships could be fully repaired after breach of trust, while others might need to exist in a more limited form. Time would tell which direction ours would take. Back in Chicago the following week, Amanda and I discussed the experience over dinner in our favorite neighborhood restaurant. You seem different since Thanksgiving, she observed. More settled somehow. I considered this. I think I've finally accepted that I can't control how others perceive or treat me, only how I respond. The family patterns will probably never completely change, but my participation in them has. That's the definition of growth, she smiled. Creating new responses to old triggers. I keep thinking about what my father said during our diner conversation, I mused. About confusing support with enablement. It applies to so many relationships, not just family. Including how we treat ourselves, Amanda added. You've always been harder on yourself than anyone else. She was right. The standards I'd held myself to had often been impossibly high, while simultaneously accepting far less than I deserved from others. That imbalance had created the perfect conditions for the patterns that had dominated my family relationships for decades. The business loan situation with Jessica had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for profound personal growth. By standing firm in my boundaries, I had not only protected my financial investment, but had also invested in a healthier version of myself, one who understood that respect wasn't negotiable and that love without accountability wasn't actually love at all. As winter settled over Chicago, the monthly reports from Jessica's boutique continued to show improvement. My parents planned a spring gathering at the lake house for anyone who can attend. A small but meaningful shift in language that acknowledged each family member's autonomy. Amanda and I discussed whether we might join for a few days, no longer feeling the obligation, but considering the possibility of participation on our own terms. The transformation wasn't about creating perfect relationships, but about establishing healthier ones, built on mutual respect rather than obligation, on clear agreements rather than unspoken expectations, on genuine support rather than enabling. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who took your support for granted? What would you have done in my situation with the loan and the family vacation? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and standing up for yourself. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to hold firm to your boundaries and let natural consequences unfold.